Fellas, this week is UFC 301, and I'm here to tell you that this is an underrated fight card. Now, I know you're probably thinking, who am I to say this when I've literally made a video critiquing the entire card? Now, I understand there are a few problems with the card that I'm going to go into before I say why this is actually an underrated card. The first reason I understand that this is kind of being called a glorified fight night is because there's not really any big stars. If you take away Jose Aldo and his big return, this is essentially just a fight night. There's no pay-per-view stars on this card, and that's exactly what a pay-per-view is meant to be. It's meant to be stacked full of at least a few big stars in the UFC, at least a big title fight, and it just doesn't seem like we have that. We've got a title fight on the card in the flyweight division. We've not really any big stars, and besides, like I said, Jose Aldo, there's no big stars in this fight card, which is why people are saying it's not main event or not pay-per-view worthy. Another big reason I think it's going to be, kind of hated on is because it's in Brazil. Brazil's kind of like a cursed place when it comes to fight cards. I mean, the last event in Brazil, Almeida versus Lewis, had the most boring main event of all time. And then even the last pay-per-view in Brazil with Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill, even that was cursed with the fans leaving for Glover Teixeira's retirement and the Brazilian crowd just being horrible overall. And I feel like every UFC fan has a bitter taste in their mouth when it comes to Brazil, which rightfully so. I'm going to be honest, they're not a good crowd. So the fact that it's in Brazil definitely takes away as well. And the third reason, a flyweight main event. Flyweights, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to take away from the fighters, but I just can't see them ever main event in a pay-per-view. It doesn't really make any sense. I think there should be co-main events. So now that we've actually got a flyweight main event, it just feels like a fight night with a title on it. So I can understand why people don't like it as a pay-per-view, and I fully understand why people might not, might refuse to pay for this event. But when you actually break down the fights on the main card, this is actually going to have a lot of bangers on it, and I really do feel like UFC 301, if you tune in, it's going to be one of those cards that gets absolutely flamed on the build-up to the card, but then when it actually happens, it's actually ends up being a good card. So we'll go in there with the main event, Pantoja versus Steve Erceg. Yeah, I know you're probably mad at the fact that it's a flyweight main event. This is going to be a good fight. Pantoja is the guy in the flyweight division, but I really do feel like if there's one guy that's going to put Pantoja's lights out in the flyweight division, it's Steve Erceg. He's going to be the guy to do it. This guy is crisp boxing. His accuracy is insane. He's just knocked out Matt Schnell, and he's looked great in the UFC so far, regardless of only having like 3 fights and being ranked number 10. But Steve Erceg's got serious boxing, better boxing than Pantoja. And obviously, when it comes to Pantoja, this guy's got grueling grappling. His jiu-jitsu's amazing, and he's been able to take care of Brandon Moreno and Brandon Royval on multiple occasions at this point. On top of that, he's got other flyweights on his resume as well. So Pantoja, he seems like the new guy in the flyweight division. So it's an interesting fight. Can Pantoja overwhelm Steve Erceg and do what he does to everyone? Or can Steve Erceg go out there and knock him out? I don't think it's going to be a boring fight. I think it's going to be an absolute scrap, and I really do feel like Steve Erceg is going to put up a fight, and if he doesn't, he's going to end up getting finished early. I sense of finishing this fight. It can go from either of them, either a submission from Pantoja or a knockout from Erceg. So I feel like the main event, it's going to end up as a finish, and I think it's going to be much more action-packed than Royval versus Pantoja. So I feel like the main event's good. Co-main event, this is, for some people would say, the people's main event. We got the return of Jose Aldo against Jonathan Martinez. No one really expected Aldo to return, but he's here now. Aldo's returning against Jonathan Martinez, and this is a great fight. First of all, the battle of the leg kicks. You're going to see both of these guys not be able to walk for about 5 weeks after this fight. They're going to destroy each other's leg kicks. I mean, Jose Aldo, he's historically and notoriously known for absolutely destroying the legs of every opponent that he goes against, and Jonathan Martinez is literally coming off a win over Adrian Yanez, in which he destroyed his legs in that fight. Both of these guys have great leg kicks. Martinez is on a streak right now of multiple bantamweights, and he's looking great doing that as well. And obviously, Jose Aldo, do I need to explain, one of the greatest. And to be honest, Jose Aldo, people are going to call him washed or whatever. He's coming off a loss to Merab, fair enough, but that's Merab. Before the Merab fight, he was beating guys like Rob Font, Pedro Munoz, even Marlon Vera as well, the former title challenger. This guy was getting wins. I don't think he's washed, even though he's not going to be as good as he once was. I think this is going to be a scrap. I think it's going to be a striking masterclass from both of them. And like I said, the battle of the leg kicks. And we get to see Jose Aldo return. He's a big star. So the core main event's a W already. Featured fight of the night. Fair enough, having Anthony Smith as the featured fight of any pay-per-view is probably a crime. But we're going to see Vito Petrino finally take out Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith is going to get taken out, and all these delusional takes that he's been saying are going to go away. Anthony Smith has looked terrible in his last few. His last 2 wins are against deluded, not deluded, but, you know, just a terrible Ryan Spann. His last 2 wins both coming to the same guy, Ryan Spann, which isn't that impressive. Just got knocked out by Khalil Roundtree. He's going to be facing Hill. Smith's on his way out, and we're going to see a young, hungry Vito Petrino take his place and absolutely demolish him. He's undefeated, is Vito Petrino. He's a nightmare grappler, and if Anthony Smith can somehow get the win in this fight, you know what? Allow Anthony Smith to keep on with his delusion. It makes for some great moments when he's on commentary, not on commentary, but, you know, when he's broadcasting, because, you know, it's kind of funny how the guy's so deluded. So if Anthony Smith can actually get a win over Vito Petrino, we get to continue the delusion of Anthony Smith. But if Vito Petrino takes out Anthony Smith, we've got a new contender in the light heavyweight division in Vito Petrino that I truly think is a threat to everyone. So the featured fight of the night, we're going to see Vito Petrino, in my opinion, cement himself as a new contender. And I don't even think it's going to be a boring fight. It's the toughest fight of Petrino's career so far, but at the same time, it's Anthony Smith. Then we've got Mikel Pereira versus Iho Portieria. Yeah, Portieria, I did a video not long ago. I thought he was supposed to be fighting Sharputin Magomedov. Apparently, that's not going through. Mikel Pereira, one of the funnest fighters in the UFC. I'm going to be honest. He came, obviously, the knockout over Andre Petrosky, and only just at UFC 299, submitted Mikel when he dropped him. I think it was a body shot where he dropped him and then went for a rear naked choke. Looked amazing. This guy's on a huge winning streak. One of the funnest fighters in the middleweight division, and he's not far from climbing the rankings. And I feel like a win over Portieria, it's probably going to do that. Portieria is not the most impressive fighter. I feel like he's kind of being used by the UFC to you know, help these other interesting strikers climb the rankings, like Sharputin Magomedov, and obviously now with Pereira. So that's going to be a really fun fight, and it's never a boring fight when Pereira's fighting. So Pereira versus Portieria, it's going to be a fun fight, and like I said, maybe it doesn't have the star power there, but if you want fun fights, that's going to be a fun fight for you. And then Paul Craig versus Caio Borralho. Yeah, Paul Craig, I'm going to be honest, he's one of those fighters that it's really hard to bet with Paul Craig. He's got wins over Nikita Krylov, Jamal Hill, Magomed Ankalaev. And you look at him and you're thinking, this guy, how can you bet against him? He's even got a win over Andre Muniz, another great grappler, but he's just been destroyed by Brendan Allen. He got finished by Johnny Walker last time he was in Brazil, and overall he's just not the most reliable fighter, and I really do feel like what's his name, Borralho, he's really going to take him out in this fight. His submission game is amazing. He's really well-rounded. He's a great grappler as well. His submission defense specifically is good for a guy who's so jiu-jitsu heavy in Paul Craig. It's a great grappling matchup between the both of them. It's not going to be boring. It's either going to be Paul Craig pulling off a submission that nobody expected, or it's going to be Borralho destroying Paul Craig, probably getting a finish, and then climbing himself into the middleweight rankings. Honestly, you look at this fight card, there's not one fight, at least on this main card, that I can look at and say this is going to be a boring fight. With fights like Craig and Borralho, great grappling matchup. Smith versus Petrino, we get a new light heavyweight contender. I've already explained Pantoja and Erceg, and obviously Aldo Martinez being great fights. Pereira's never in a boring fight. UFC 301, you look at the main card, honestly, great main card. You can't discredit it, even though it doesn't have the star power, even though it might be in Brazil and it might have a flyweight main event. This is going to be a banger of a card in my opinion, and it's going to go down as one of those cards that pay-per-view wise did terrible and hype wise did terrible, but it actually performed really well, and it's one of those cards that leave people talking about it. So that's my thoughts on UFC 301. I really do feel like it's going to be underrated. Pay-per-view worthy? No, but is it going to perform? In my opinion, yes. I really do think it is, and we're going to get so many new contenders like Petrino from this card, and maybe we get Aldo matched up against a bigger fight after Martinez, like maybe a Cruz or something. So let me know your thoughts on UFC 301. How do you think it's going to perform? And thank you for watching.